according to our calculations, we're getting only to about half the growth we could be generating from this additional funding. And unfortunately, the reason is simple. It's an old one. This money that's now available is being used to maybe cater to your voter clientele. Countries like China, which traditionally maybe weren't producing at the same quality level, are catching up, are overtaking us. So the Germans have to learn to become more competitive on the price sector.
2 years of recession, 1 of stagnation. If you're keeping score, that's the German economy over the past 3 years, counting the one that we're currently wrapping up. But what will it take to get out? My guest, Ulrike Malmendier, says Berlin needs to do more. She's part of the German Council of Economic Experts, which just updated its prognosis for 2026. And, hint, it could be better. But we actually began our conversation by talking about the economy in America, where Malmendier lives. I asked her how hard it's been for experts there to predict where that economy is heading, given the lack of fresh data during the shutdown. Take a look.
I would say that's an aspect of the shutdown I'm actually not as concerned about. In general, the US has been actually at the frontier of providing data, of using data. If we now have a couple of weeks, even if it's a couple of months that are missing, generally we're able to fill in the gaps ex post. So in that sense, if the US returns to the path they were on, I think the colleagues at the Council of Economic Advisors will be happy enough.
Give us a sense, what picture are we seeing in the U.S. economy right now? This is where you teach, where you live?
That's right. So what we do see is that the stock market, has been doing great. Often that's then generalized to the U.S. economy. However, it turns out that the so-called Max 7, so these kind of tech firms, are really driving it. In terms of one of the big projects of President Trump to strengthen and support the manufacturing industry of the U.S., there's little evidence that this is happening. I wouldn't even blame him because the manufacturing has been on a decline with, little blips up and down for various events that happened. I don't think that this is stoppable. The big question we're all asking right now is, to what extent will AI be able to lead to productivity, lead to growth? Will the US firms manage to put it to a productive use, or will it may remain in the realm of just kind of feeding consumers with certain information and services, which at the end of the day won't be that profitable?
Ulrike, today you really focused on the German economy. The German Council of Economic Experts, of which you're a part, has released its fall prognosis. U.S. tariffs have been especially harsh on German companies who export. How much of Germany's economic problems are because of what's happening in the U.S.?
Well, indeed, the export industry, which has been a pillar of German growth, has been weakening. We have to be clear about the fact that this has started already earlier. The German economy, the German export-oriented firms have lost their competitiveness. It's particular in terms of the prices at which they're able to offer their goods. In the past, that was remedied by German quality often being unreached around the globe by other countries. But even countries like China, which traditionally maybe weren't producing at the same quality level, are catching up, are overtaking us. So the Germans have to learn to become more competitive on the price sector. The other big factor the German economy is suffering from is the lack of labor. We just don't have enough hours worked by people. That's weakening the German economy general, and is also not good for export orientation. So then add on top of that the volatility induced by the reversal of economic policy, trade policy we have known from the US over the past decades. That's a double whammy that's hard to digest for the German economy.
Ulrike, you focus on behavioral economics, such as the way past experiences affect current decisions by consumers, for example. Given inflation, given tariffs, given the rhetoric in the world right now, how difficult has it become to predict consumer behavior in places like the US and Germany?
Yeah, it has almost become a running joke that at every new prognosis, not only us, but also other institutions are thinking, okay, consumption spending has to pick up again. Consumers have to become optimistic again. And then yet again, we are wrong. And consumers are more scared, are like more careful and cautious in their spending. So the constant exposure to one crisis after the other, starting maybe with COVID-19, then here in Germany in particular, the energy crisis induced by the Russian aggression towards Ukraine and the war in Ukraine. And now for our economy, the shocks through the new trade policies, tariff conflicts, that creates an uncertainty which won't be remedied once all these problems are solved. Suppose we could perfectly solve all these problems, go back to the status quo where we were before. Unfortunately, people would still act in a more scared way, be more cautious in their spending. So the only remedy for that is we have to generate stability. I do have high hopes that the Europeans can get their act together and create that stability in the European Union, lower the barriers, make this one common single market where firms can trade, can finance. I think that would be an excellent way out of these uncertainties and volatility.
One of the focal points, in fact, of that new report is capital markets across Europe and in Germany. And we see that there's a recommendation, or that I should say that the Council of Experts is in favor of the development of more private retirement funds in Germany. This is something that in the U.S. has long been around. I would imagine this is akin to the individual retirement account or the IRA. Maybe some people are wondering, why don't they have such things already in Germany? Maybe you can give us an idea of the differences between household investment in the U.S. and in Germany.
Yeah, that is an excellent question. Why on earth do the Germans still not have a capital market-based retirement system? It just turns out when you start from a pay-as-you-go system, it can be really hard to implement that change. And one politician after the other, one administration after the other has been kind of reluctant to implement change there, didn't want to scare off voters. I do have really high hopes for the current government that they will manage it. I'm very proud to say they built on an idea we developed in the Council of Economic Experts here in Germany, the idea of a youth portfolio, which is now called the Early Start Retirement Program, so that already when you're at school age, you start investing just 10 euros a month in a broadly diversified capital market-based account. We feel that, my research on experience effects argues that that would help alleviate these concerns, these deep-rooted fears Germans have about the stock market and about capital markets. And it looks as if even then adding on, so that's from age 6 to 18, adding on for the population that's actually working, the working population, having at least an element of private capital market-based retirement saving is feasible. It is going into the parliament. I very much hope we can utilize the momentum and finally get to the place the US got to 60 years ago, the Scandinavian countries got to 25 years ago, UK has a similar system. Let's hope it gets implemented now.
Real quick, Ulrike, I want to get to the heart of your report. The German economy, if we look at the past 3 years, 2 of them in recession, this year you're projecting essentially stagnation. Why is the German economy only just creeping along?
Yeah, the topic of competitiveness, price competitiveness is one big factor. We have lost our competitive edge in terms of being the only one who can produce certain quality in many dimensions. That's one factor. Second factor I mentioned already is we're just lacking labor. Like the so-called labor volume, the number of hours worked in Germany is too low to produce more growth. And that's not because Gen Z is unwilling to work enough and want their work-life balance, all these complaints. It's simply because we don't have enough workforce. So we need to become a country that is more open to immigration of people who are willing to provide their labor here. There are other aspects which do also play a role. We have been hit with high energy prices. And finally, one of the 3 motors and pillars of the German economy next to machinery and chemicals was automobile. And there we kind of missed the signal that actually combustion engines won't be the future anymore. Our industry, which was world leading, I think has switched too late and is kind of losing its standing and is not contributing as much to German growth anymore.
Ulrike, the question everyone here in Germany is asking right now after your report, we know that German lawmakers agreed to a €500 billion investment spending package that's supposed to really start hitting in 2026. This is what we've been hearing for a while. And yet you're now projecting only 0.9 of a percentage point in growth for 2026. That's actually down from your assessment in spring. How is that possible when all that kind of investment, all that stimulus is on the way?
Okay, so in fairness, before I get into the complaining about what the government is doing with that €500 billion, in fairness, the effects of using this money to invest really in the long-term future of the country, doing investment in infrastructure, traffic, if possible, towards kind of education, human capital, they would really only pay off around 2030. So maybe, at least on the communication side, the government has made the mistake of raising hopes too much that we would see something already this year or maybe next year. So in fairness, even if everything was done perfectly, the effects were really only kicking in a couple of years. However, you are correct that according to our calculations, we're getting only to about half the growth we could be generating from this additional funding. And unfortunately, the reason is simple. It's an old one. This money that's now available is being used to maybe cater to your voter clientele. Like there's this mother's retirement money that has been extended for older generations. There is support for people who are commuting. There's support for the gastro, the restaurant catering business. All this is a way of using money available that is not an investment in the future, that will not generate multiplicative effects we are hoping for. And that's why we have been downward revising where we see the German economy going.
Ulrike, wonderful. Thank you so much for your time. We really appreciate it.
You're welcome.